It was a cold Friday evening in New York City. The luxury restaurant, La Mirage, was filled with the quiet clinking of glasses, the scent of expensive wines, and the chatter of the city's elite. Among the guests was Richard Morgan, a powerful billionaire known not just for his wealth, but also for his pride. He wore arrogance like a suit, and everyone around him treated him with the same reverence people usually reserved for royalty. But tonight, Richard wasn't just here for business. Sitting across the table was his 12-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan was different. He had been born with a disability that affected his legs, forcing him to use crutches to walk. Richard loved his son, yes, but he also felt ashamed. He never admitted it out loud, but in his heart, he often wished Ethan was normal. Because of this, he rarely took him out in public. Tonight was an exception. The restaurant had hired a live jazz band for the evening. Music filled the air, and soon couples began dancing in the middle of the grand hall. Ethan's eyes lit up as he watched the dancers spin gracefully across the floor. He tugged gently on his father's sleeve. "Dad, can I try dancing? Just once?" Richard froze. His heart clenched. Richard whispered sternly, "Ethan, no. You'll fall. People will stare." Ethan lowered his head, his small hands gripping his crutches tightly. And then, something unexpected happened. From across the room, a young waitress named Sophie had been watching. She was no one special in Richard's world, just a worker, someone invisible. But Sophie had seen the sparkle in Ethan's eyes, and she couldn't ignore it. As she walked past their table, she bent down and whispered with a warm smile, "Hey champ, would you like to dance with me?" Ethan's face lit up instantly. Richard's jaw tightened. A billionaire's son, dancing in front of strangers? He wanted to stop it. He wanted to shout no! But before he could, Sophie gently helped Ethan up and guided him toward the dance floor. The music slowed. People watched in silence as a fragile boy, holding onto a waitress's hands, began to sway with the rhythm. His steps were clumsy, but his laughter filled the entire room with a kind of magic money could never buy. For the first time in years, Richard Morgan felt something strange stirring inside his chest. Was it pride? Was it shame? Or was it the beginning of a transformation he never expected? Soft reminder after 2 minutes. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We bring you powerful stories that will touch your heart every week. And so, under the warm lights of a grand restaurant, a billionaire father witnessed his son's joy, and a waitress's courage to give him that moment. But Richard wasn't ready to admit what he felt yet. Instead, anger and pride boiled inside him. Because deep down, he didn't like that a stranger was doing what he himself had failed to do. The restaurant hall was filled with whispers. Some smiled warmly at the sight of Ethan dancing. Others, dressed in pearls and silk, raised their eyebrows as if it was a spectacle they had never expected to see. Richard's face burned red. His powerful reputation, the man who never tolerated weakness, was now overshadowed by his son wobbling across the floor with the help of a waitress. When the song ended, Sophie guided Ethan back to the table. His cheeks were glowing, his eyes shining brighter than the chandeliers above. Ethan, breathless, smiling. "Dad, did you see me? I was dancing." Richard forced a stiff smile, but his voice was cold. Richard, low, stern. "Sit down, Ethan." Ethan's joy faded. Sophie noticed. She frowned but remained calm, collecting the empty glasses from the table. Once Ethan looked away, Richard leaned toward Sophie. His voice was sharp, almost like a blade. "Richard, who gave you permission to involve yourself in my family? Do you have any idea who I am?" Sophie didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eyes, her voice firm but gentle.
I don't care who you are, sir. I only care about that boy. He just wanted to feel normal for once. You should have seen the happiness on his face." Richard froze. No one ever spoke to him like that. People bowed, people obeyed, but this waitress? She dared to challenge him. He clenched his fists. Richard, angrily, whispering, "You have no right." Sophie cut in. "Maybe not, but sometimes a child doesn't need riches or power or your name. Sometimes all he needs is a chance to be seen." Her words pierced Richard deeper than he expected. He wanted to argue, but something inside him cracked. Meanwhile, Ethan, still smiling faintly, whispered, "Dad, can I dance again, please?" Richard looked into his son's hopeful eyes. For the first time, he noticed something. Ethan didn't want money. He didn't want gifts. All he wanted was freedom. But Richard's pride wouldn't let him say yes. So, instead, he changed the subject, hiding his emotions under a mask of control. Richard, coldly, "Eat your dinner, Ethan." The boy lowered his head, disappointed. Sophie bit her lip, her heart aching for Ethan. She wanted to say more, but she knew her place. At least for now. The rest of the dinner was tense. Richard barely touched his food. His thoughts raced. Who was this waitress to make him feel so small? Why did her words echo in his mind louder than the applause of all the boardrooms he had ever commanded? When the evening ended, Richard stood tall, his usual mask of authority returning. "Richard, to Ethan, let's go. The car is waiting." But as they left, Ethan turned to Sophie, his little voice soft but full of gratitude. "Thank you for letting me dance." Sophie bent down, smiled warmly, and whispered, "Never stop dancing, Ethan. Don't let anyone tell you you can't." Richard heard those words. They stung him more than he wanted to admit. As he held Ethan's hand and walked out of the restaurant, Richard's heart was heavy. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the father his son deserved. If you're moved by this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories that inspire and touch lives. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Sophie's words echoed in his mind. Ethan's laughter replayed in his memory. And slowly, the billionaire began to question everything he thought he knew about love, family, and what truly matters in life. But he didn't know yet that fate was about to give him one more test.
That night, Richard tossed and turned in his massive bed. The silence of his mansion was deafening. No laughter, no warmth, only echoes of Sophie's voice. Sophie's words in his memory. Sometimes all he needs is a chance to be seen. Richard sat up, his chest heavy. For years, he had given Ethan everything money could buy. Private doctors, tutors, the best equipment. But never once had he given him the one thing that mattered most. Freedom to live. Tears welled in Richard's eyes, something he hadn't allowed in decades. He buried his face in his hands, whispering into the darkness. Richard whispering, "What have I done?" The next morning, Richard made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He drove Ethan, not to the office, not to therapy, but back to the small restaurant. When they walked in, Sophie was already working, carrying plates with her usual quiet strength. She froze when she saw them. Richard walked up to her, his voice lower, softer, almost unrecognizable. "Richard, Miss Sophie, right? I owe you an apology." Sophie blinked in surprise. Billionaires didn't apologize, not to waitresses. Sophie, hesitant, "Sir, you don't need to." Richard, interrupting, sincere, "Yes, I do. Last night, you gave my son more joy in 5 minutes than I have in years, and I was too blind to see it. Sophie's eyes softened. Ethan tugged his father's sleeve. Ethan, excited. Dad, can I dance again? Please? Richard looked at him. For once, he didn't feel anger or shame. He only felt pride. Richard, smiling faintly, Go on, son. The music started again, this time from Sophie's phone. Ethan stepped onto the small space between the tables. His movements were shaky, but his smile was radiant. Sophie joined him, guiding him step by step. And then, something no one expected happened. Richard stepped forward. The man who had never danced in public, the man who lived only for deals and profits, held his son's hand and joined the dance. The entire restaurant went silent. Patrons put down their forks, waiters froze. For the first time, Richard wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a businessman. He was just a father. Ethan laughed joyfully, and Richard laughed with him, a sound so rare it made Sophie's heart swell. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause. Some people even had tears in their eyes. Richard bowed his head slightly, humbled in a way he had never been before. He turned to Sophie, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. You've given me something I couldn't buy with all the money in the world. You've given me my son back. Sophie smiled. No, sir. He was always there. You just needed to see him. Richard knelt in front of Ethan, holding his son's small hands. I'm sorry, Ethan. From now on, I promise you will never be invisible again. Ethan threw his arms around his father, and for the first time, Richard felt what true wealth really was. Not money, not power, but love. And so, the billionaire who once measured life in profits discovered the true meaning of wealth in the smile of his son and the courage of a waitress who dared to let him dance. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness is all it takes to change a life forever. One morning, Maria accidentally spills tea on Alexander's expensive Italian suit. Enraged, Alexander yells, "You're worthless. You're fired. Get out of my house this instant." Maria begs him for mercy, explaining her sick child and her desperate need for the job. But Alexander doesn't listen. He has her thrown out with nothing but a small suitcase. Maria left that mansion in tears, but sometimes the end of one chapter is only the beginning of another. Maria works tirelessly, taking odd jobs, cleaning houses, and even working nights in diners. She faces humiliation, poverty, and endless struggles. Her only motivation? Her young daughter, Elena. Through sleepless nights, Maria whispers, "One day, my love, we will rise. One day, our lives will be different." At a community center where Maria works as a cleaner, she overhears a seminar about entrepreneurship and small businesses. Something clicks in her mind. She starts small, baking bread, sewing clothes, selling them at local markets. Slowly, customers begin to notice her dedication and quality. Years pass. Maria's business grows. She opens a bakery, then a clothing line. Her daughter Elena excels in school, later studying business and helping her mother expand. From nothing, Maria builds an empire of her own. She had been dismissed as a nobody, but Maria had discovered the true power of resilience. Alexander Carter, the once untouchable billionaire, faces ruin. A financial scandal destroys his company. His lavish mansion is sold. His wealth evaporates. Desperate and broken, he walks into a corporate office for a meeting with a potential investor. He enters the boardroom and freezes. At the head of the table sits Maria, elegant, confident, and powerful. Elena sits beside her as co-director. Alexander, stammering, Maria? Is that you? Yes, Mr. Carter. Welcome. I believe you're seeking investment. The tables have turned. The maid he once humiliated is now in control of his fate. But instead of revenge, Maria offers wisdom. 10 years ago, you threw me out as if I was nothing. Today, I stand here because I believed in myself and because I refused to give up. Money doesn't make you powerful, Mr. Carter. Character does. Alexander lowers his head in shame. Final scene, reflection. The camera fades on Maria leaving the boardroom with Elena. Narrator, emotional. In life, never underestimate the ones you look down upon. The people you dismiss today may be the very people you bow to tomorrow. Respect costs nothing, but its value is everything.